Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sparing Partners. Today, we're going to do something relatively new. We're going to cover a topic that I've never covered before. When I started doing Sparing Partners as a podcast, I started to run out of topics very, very soon, and it turned out it was the opposite. I think I've said that already. But today, I just uncovered a big thing that I have not really talked about, which is sort of the marketing strategies of both operators, vendors, and everybody else in the industry. And so it's with great pleasure to have to talk to Kris Kozamchak, the principal at Canon Communications, about this. And as I think you know, in Aspiring Partners, it's the guest that decides the topic because that's the way to be actually say something new that I have not thought about. And this is the case today with Kris, who suggested this. And I said, well, that's an excellent topic. How can we not talk about it? And Kris has a huge amount of experience in this, and I've known her for a very long time. And we worked together when she was at Conscope. So, Kris, welcome to Sparing Partners, and tell us what you're doing these days and
Well,
what you've done in the past. How did you end up doing what you're doing today? That would be good too.
great. Thank you, Monica. I'm excited to be on with you. This is obviously a topic that I'm very passionate about and appreciate you opening it up for this. So, yes, I started my own company about 4.5 years ago, focused mainly on technology. It's something I've been in for more years than I can count. I joke and say that I started back when my hair was brown and there's gray underneath here, but I started a long time ago, right out of college, just working for technology companies and agencies. So, I say back when there was still controversy around CDMA, TDMA, and GSM, which, no one ever thinks about these days, but that's, started out there working for different companies and then went on to Nortel, did the .com thing, worked for several tech companies around the .com, and then ended up again at an agency where I was doing a lot of wireless with Edelman and Shandwick, and then went out on my own again and worked for a lot more wireless companies. So I'm doing RF planning, just RFID stuff, just all again in technology. Ended up working a lot for international companies, so worked for BT, NEC. I joked when I went to Comscope and said it was the first U.S. company I'd worked for. It was nice to be on regular hours in the U.S. And after leaving there, started my own company again, just supporting tech companies. So it's been a passion of mine, and the marketing part of it, I think, is fascinating because as we'll talk about, there's so many different technologies that are impacting it, and how companies message and ride the waves of the technologies is becoming, I think, even more of a challenge.
Absolutely, and welcome to the world of the independents. So, as you say, it is a passion, but it's also interesting because we never, whatever we do in telecoms, or at least that's my view, we never get bored. But now, not only we are not bored, but I think that it's almost a little bit almost overwhelming because the whole market out there, it's getting to a level of complexity that we were not used to have maybe 10 years ago or even less than that, because there is all sort of, geopolitical tensions that used not to be there or not to be there as much. There is the usual technology development, but then there is all like the AI stuff coming in, and it's not entirely clear how we are integrating it with the overall message. So things are getting, I would say, more complex, but also more interesting. We never get bored. So maybe you can give us a little bit of what do you think has been changing in the last, maybe a couple of years even.
Sure. So I think two things have changed significantly. The first I'll talk about is AI. So, we I think a lot of our listeners probably have been to MWC Barcelona for years. And I think it was about 2 years ago that AI started popping up, and at a few meetings here or there and booths or in messages. And if you were there last year, it became much more prevalent. And I'm already hearing this year it's, kind of the year of AI. And if you look at the themes for MWC and not just with MWC, but if you look at all of the conferences throughout. So I was looking at, data center conferences, it's all about AI. Smart cities, it's all about AI. You look at, we were looking at a couple different verticals, even, healthcare, AI. There's always tracks for all of this. So it's becoming more incorporated into our everyday life, as not just as business people, working with the companies we work with, but also on the consumer side. We think we've talked about how we use it in our daily life pretty much for small things. And even my kids are using it. So it's really proliferated throughout. So I think that's the first thing is AI, and we can talk a little bit more about it. But the second is the policy through both administrations. So both through the Biden administration and also now through the Trump administration, the policies that have taken effect here in the US. So, if you have Chairman Carr, who, with the One Big Beautiful Bill, has now Spectrum Auction Authority. And also, he's got his delete program, taking back, taking off regulations that he says don't necessarily need to be there. So there's so much policy changes. And so companies are having to deal with both of these issues, whether it's the tariffs or it is, FCC changes or AI, and how do you incorporate it in either your business or your product, and what's your message around that? I think those have been probably the two biggest things that I've seen over the past 2 years that are just impacting, especially marketing, because then you have to have a message around if you're going to incorporate it in a product or in your company. And if you are, how are you doing that? How is it impacting your customers? So there's so much to it.
Yeah, and absolutely. And so the question of what is that you want to do and how is that you explain it? And what's actually last year at Mobile Congress, I took pictures, the tagline of the companies, and everybody had AI onto it. But not only that, but pretty much everybody had the same message. I mean, it was remarkable the uniformity of it. So the question is that is everybody just using AI as a kind of, I wouldn't say a placeholder, but it's just something that they have to mention in the same way that everybody had to do 5G, but they don't necessarily either need it, know how to use it, or use it properly, or use it yet to a full extent. I mean, how do you see the sort of the pull and push between having to do this? Obviously, AI it's very helpful. We're not denying that. But the question is that are they articulating the message in the best way? And I guess that's a big question. Yeah, and obviously there's everything out there. So, but what's your feeling there?
It is a great question because there is a lot of pressure, and we talked about this, a lot of pressure to include AI because it's the term du jour. So, one of the things I just actually had a conversation this week with a client about AI and how are we going to message it? Because the conversation was, is it key to their product? In other words, is it really going to help them sell their product or not? And the conclusion was no, that their product stands alone, stands as it is. And it's not really helping because AI really is about the data that you're collecting and how you're using it and responding. And that's not what their core product is. So if it's not, then why would you mention it just to tag on? Because then if you mention it, then you really need to explain it because there's a lot of people questioning, as you just said, what's the value? What am I getting out of it? And if they're not getting something out of it, they may dismiss you. So unless there's something that you can explain what that AI is actually doing and you can message it well, then my recommendation has been let's not message against the AI. You can reference it, how it impacts what you are doing, but it's not a part of your product. So you can say, yes, AI at the edge, if it's, wireless or, if it impacts a data center or something and how you're collecting it. But if it really doesn't have a part, like on their website, we really don't have a lot around AI because it's not something that they want to get mixed, I don't say mixed up in, but they really don't have a clear message for it, and it's not a key part. But then I have another one that it is a core piece, like because they're doing software that is really, it needs that AI piece of it to be able to give responses back and to do certain things. So they've really leaned into the AI piece of it because it is a differentiator for them. And they've gone out with a couple messages and received good responses, but because they can really explain it and how their product is delivering true AI, not just a tagline. So I think that there's delineation there of do you really need it in your messaging and can you truly do it versus no, we use it in our business, but it's not a core piece of it.
That's excellent advice, and I wish you would give that advice to many more companies. In the sense that I have a sense that, and maybe because I have my background, it's more on AI, so I tend to kind of go deeper with the questions, and I'm more based on the technology side of things. And so I feel like a lot of companies they just put AI, like you put salt and pepper on your food, and then when you start digging and you say, yeah, but why you use it? Why do you need? Because if you don't need AI, you're much better off. But that means that you have something that it's easier. Why not? There's nothing wrong with it, right? And yet, a lot of people, a lot of companies, I think out there, they just put AI everything everywhere, and then when you start trying to understand, there is just nothing behind the slide deck, so to say.
Exactly.
So I think that's I think we need to sort of differentiate. And so now, if I might just sort of mention, like Nokia, for instance, in the last presentation, that was just so much about was about AI, and it's a great company, but on the other hand, it's not an AI company. And you don't want, I mean, you want to use AI to do whatever you need to do, but isn't it just a little bit too much AI?
It's yeah, it's interesting too. So, over the past couple of weeks since their announcement, there's, been so much, and I'm sure you've read it all. It's just, there's the death of Nokia on this side when it comes to these type of businesses, and why are they doing this? Maybe it's their investment that they got and their partnerships. But one of the things that I really look at, even on the marketing angle, is when we're talking, is looking at it. What's the bottom line? Is it impacting your business? And I think looking at Nokia, the businesses that they set aside, they were having losses on them. And I think they're looking at this AI to say there is a lot of an investment in it right now. There's a lot going on. So there's an opportunity here that we don't want to miss. Now, there's a lot of companies that have gone that route. I mean, you had, was it Google that were trying their fiber? And they thought, oh, we'll jump on that bandwagon too. And look where that got them. And they had to exit out of it. So, these are risks for companies to change their strategy and chase the latest thing. But if they really feel it's an investment that's going to pay off for them, that's why you see, I think, a lot of companies going after it, even though it may be a little risky and they may not know exactly what they're doing. But specifically with Nokia, and you know this, I mean, they are tied very closely to the telcos, and the telcos are really pushing the AI as well. So that I don't know for sure, but to me, on the marketing angle, that would make sense to follow where your customers are going as well.
Yeah, but on the other hand, it's kind of like be sort of a herd kind of thing where everybody's going that way, and that that's kind of again the 5G kind of story. Like everybody has to do 5G, but then there was a lot of 4G that was good. So yes, there are parts of the business that might be losing money because they're not there yet, or there's something like Google Fiber where it's okay, well, we tried, it didn't work. But it seems like in the case of Nokia, they're just getting rid of some things that have been core in their business forever. And it just seems like, and this is actually kind of beyond marketing, and then maybe it's for a different podcast, but um, there is a natural well, in our side of the world, is that you want to go for the sectors, the parts of your business that have highest profitability, right?
Yeah.
Well, that sounds very good. The problem is that that market might be small, might not be there yet, and now might not be as much as high profitability in the long term. And so you might need to do, say, manufacturing that has lower profitability, but hey, so which is the kind of thing. So I recently read Breakneck by Dan Wang about the differences between US and China. And in China, they do a lot of, I mean, they you know, if you see like even Huawei ZTE, they don't, they just keep expanding, right? But a lot of the business in for Chinese companies is that they do a lot of manufacturing that is much lower profitability, and we don't have any appetite for that. And so yeah, you just try to go for profitability but not volume necessarily, and then you end up with potentially an issue. But maybe this is not really marketing.
Well, it is.
But where I'm going is that it just,
Yeah.
well, because then you see that Nokia is trying to do, so we're trying to, in general in the US, to do more manufacturing, but manufacturing has less margin. The margin is lower. So are we ready from a financial market point of view? And I don't know the answer to that. Well, actually, I have a sense, but are we willing to accept that?
Right. And I think that's a great question. And it does play into marketing to a degree, because if you think about in the US, a lot of the companies that we're talking about from manufacturing, and this crosses not just the ICT telecom,
Yeah,
but
it's everywhere.
even,
Yeah.
even into, automotive, et cetera. But, you have, these are public companies. And so their shareholders or their
Yeah.
investors put a lot of pressure on them. And then you look in, well, you're talking about China with Huawei, ZTE, et cetera. A lot of that's funded by the government, or they have government backing. So
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the same pressures, and they can do a lot of things differently that here in the US, it is a challenge, because then marketing wise, when you do make those shifts, and then, you have to explain to your investors, and you have to market to consumers, because, it's not just the big investment firms, but, consumers and their portfolios are a part of this. And you're trying to say, okay, why are we making these market changes? And you're seeing that, I think, a lot too, as some of these companies are coming out and working with this administration to make those investments in the US, and they're capitalizing on their marketing to say, yes, we're doing a new data center here,
Mm-hmm.
we're using our BEAD funds here. They're really being aggressive in their marketing of what they're doing to align with this administration, to try and capitalize on that, because it is very different here in the
Well,
US.
but in a way, it seems like we're trying to go down the Chinese mode where you have more of a government, supporting it. But then, exactly as you say, the financial market might or might not buy it. And the thing is that you kind of have to, if you do want to do more manufacturing, you have to sort of accept somewhat of a different profitability or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's I guess from a marketing point of view, that creates all sorts of issues. How do you balance all of this?
Well, and it's extremely difficult. I mean, you can look at okay, so a lot of what I work with are companies that do private networks. So if
Mm-hmm.
you look over the past 2 years, even in private networks, and you have companies, I was just talking about this with someone else, these companies are no longer in business. They've gone out of business because they couldn't sustain, they didn't have the long
Yeah.
waiting game. And you talked about that even with, Nokia on some of the big ones. But there are companies that have, whether it's PE, private equity investments, or some other investments, and they've got to make a return for their investments. And if, a market is slow to take off, like the private networks, they have
Yes.
predicted this hockey stick, and it's been more of a slope. And so, do they get tired of it? And, you've seen even this year significant layoffs by some major companies and private networks, and across other wireless industries as well, as they just haven't had um, the ability to play the long game. And so those companies that are staying in, one of their key messages that, I've been working with a couple of them is, we do have the ability for the long game. We have financial backing. We have ability we're privately funded. We're not beholden to stockholders or PEs or whatever. And so we can play the long game. And it's a marketing message that resonates well when you're trying to sell into some of these enterprises that are like, are you going to be around? If I buy your subscription to, manage these radios or manage this, are you going to be around? And you have to message to that and make sure that, those are good things.
Yeah, and I guess they're there, the open interfaces, interoperability, ability to work with multiple vendor helps. However, it doesn't solve, I mean, because, and this has been, I've been doing a lot of work on CBRS, private networks, and I mean, private networks from Wi-Fi. I mean, I consider what enterprise Wi-Fi as a private network. So the whole private network, so like whatever you have in the enterprise, a lot. And I think it's really there's a huge growth potential. But the problem there is that to actually really, it is actually, well, I wouldn't say it's a marketing problem, but it is a question of articulating the right message so that the enterprise becomes comfortable with investing more because the enterprise knows it's necessary. But on the other way, my feeling is that they're going to put it off until they really have to invest because they see it as so complicated and like they don't want to deal with it if they can help it.
Yes. Yes.
And that is there. I think that marketing plays a huge role, and
It,
that's really, and I think it's really important because when you look at it in terms of whatever your take is on whatever we do within the U.S. Uh, enterprise is just it's really it's the biggest growth area in terms of potential.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it really does. So you always have it, and you know this in any, I'll say, new technology, you have your early adopters that just want to
Yeah.
get ahead. And you've got like in CBRS private networks, you've got John Deere, in
Yeah.
agriculture who, he's been out there just, oh, this is the greatest thing, and here's what we're doing with it. And you've got big companies like that. And then you have, I'll just say everybody else, coming behind them to say, how can I use it? Okay, so I've seen agriculture and I've seen like in airports, you've got Miami-Dade, Jonathan out there talking about that. So you've got these specific use cases, but then there's thousands of other businesses out there that are saying, okay, I'm not an airport, I'm not in agriculture, I'm not, how can I use it? And that's where the marketing message becomes really key to say, there is a use case for you. Let me help you explain it, that there
Yeah.
is value, and that's, I think, where, as you said, it's been missing a little bit, not just in private networks, then there's always some new technology. Like we were just talking about AI,
Mhm.
and it goes back to how can I use it? And unless you can really clearly state the value in your marketing message, it's why do I need it? And I think that's the hard part for a lot of these companies is that value. Why do you as an end user need this? If is it going to, are you going to get ROI from it? Are you going to decrease expenses? Are you going to get new customers? Or, what's the value? And I think the industry, specifically private networks, has had a hard time really defining that for certain industries.
Yeah, and I would say that when you talk about U.S., what are we good at? Everybody talks about the tech companies, the Googles, the Meta, and whatever. But really, a big strength in the U.S. is all these small companies. It is not the deer.
Right.
I mean, well, I'm not saying, obviously we have the relatively big ones, right? But the huge number of them is the smaller ones, and that's a
Right.
hugely unaddressed market, I mean, or under-addressed market because clearly, and I think that sort of goes back to the profitability thing. Obviously, if I'm selling whatever thing I'm selling, I'd rather go to the after the big customers because obviously they're going to give me more money each one of them. But then at the end of the day, when most of the market out there is small companies, I need to be able to reach out to them.
Right.
because that's where the volume is eventually, but it's going to be more customers, so it's going to be more complex, and the cost of sales is going to be higher. And I think that that's really, it's probably not just it's not just a US problem, but I think in the US it's especially true because there is so much entrepreneurship at this kind of a lower level, which is what makes US special. I don't know, but it's a big part of the US economy. I don't know whether it's special in the sense that other countries are better or worse, but it's so big,
Yeah.
and yet we do not address it properly, right?
Yes, and I think that's where, a lot of the SIs and VARs come in that are specialized because
Mhm.
they can meet that. And that's why I think the ICT and tech industry has really leaned into that because you do have, like, I know with some of my clients, they have ones that just specialize in education or just specialize in hospitals or just because
Yes.
again, as you just said, you can't
Different.
reach it all. So if you find that partner, that VAR or that reseller that has that niche into that, then you can go in and do that. But then again, it goes back to marketing and message of, if you're a tech company, how do you message to your VAR that just goes to
Yes.
education or just goes to, so then you've got like five messages. It's like you've got your technical message of, I need to make sure my, this speed and feed and throughput and everything works. And then you go to, you help the sales guy who's selling into, let's say, a hospital to say, okay, you've got your, cows on wheels that are going into all the different rooms and you've got Wi-Fi troubles, so here's your message to address all this. So you've got so many different messages. And then, I've been working with this on a client. It's like, then how do you construct your website so that anybody coming in, you've got five different audiences. How do they find what they need? And then differentiate from everybody else that's selling what you're selling. So,
It is actually a real challenge because you have to build, as you say, you have to build a message that uh, resonates your audience, and that's not the traditional telecom ones. Like we care about, say, latency, but if you're a hospital, yeah, you care about latency indirectly. You care about, is this thing that I'm trying to do going to work or not?
right. And
So
other
yeah,
messages like HIPAA, like,
yeah.
there are certain things like, is this HIPAA compliant? Is this, so you have, like you said, so many different messages that you have to do specifically. Yes.
Yeah. Now let's go back and put
Yeah.
together the AI part and the sort of like addressing the market, and that's a situation where we start seeing some firings like Verizon, and then you have companies like Amazon that they have announced that they're going to be moving towards more automation, and then they're going to be firing people. And they didn't say it quite that way, but we know that that's going to happen. So AI is a force for good in terms of making everything better, and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, there's also the